Welcome back, Clickies. Um, we're here. We're doing it. Deep dive lyrical analysis into 21 Pilots' Ode to Sleep. Now, before we get started, quick disclaimers. Okay, I've got a couple disclaimers before we even jump into this. First disclaimer, I have only gotten through Blurryface. I'm recording the Trench album reaction tomorrow, so I haven't heard it yet. So thus far, I'm working on just Vessel album and music videos and Blurryface album and Blurryface music videos, and that's it. I've been really careful not to get any spoilers, um, and just really tried to figure this out and puzzle this out on my own. So that brings me to my second disclaimer, and that is no spoilers, please. Please do not go into my comments and leave spoilers for me, please. I know that there's a lot of lore and there's a lot of storyline that's coming up in the next few albums. Please don't tell me any of that. Okay. I love puzzles. I love puzzling through things, as you're going to find out here in just a minute as we go through this deep dive analysis. And so I want to be able to think through it, to take in the information, take in the content as any other fan would, and puzzle through it as any other fan would have in real time. So even though you guys are miles ahead of me, and I'm sure you have all the answers as to what everything means, please don't spoil it for me. So just please don't. However, you are welcome, and please do this, okay? So don't spoil, but please do leave me tips for maybe where to look. Um, if I'm talking about something here and there's a connection to something, or I might have missed something, feel free to let me know, hey, you kind of missed something here, and then just kind of point me in that direction. Again, remembering that I've only been through Blurryface, okay? So if there's other clues or other things that are connected with these lyrics into something like Trench and Forward, I'm not gonna know about it, and I'll find out when I get there. Okay. Okay, disclaimer number 3. This analysis with this song is going to be talking about some heavier themes, such as self-harm and unaliving. You know what we're talking about. So just a bit of a trigger warning there. If you don't want to hear about that subject, or you have young ones, or just people in the room that you don't want to, you sensitive ears or whatever, just letting you know now, that topic is going to be discussed. Let's get started, y'all. Okay, so first thing I'm going to point out here, before we even get, this is the very first deep dive lyric analysis I'm going to do, and I hope to do lots more of these, so if you enjoy this type of content, please leave me a comment and let me know. In fact, I mean, let me know what song you'd want me to do next from here. But there's something that I've noticed as I've gone through and prepared for, for this, and that is that, Tyler loves to have more than one meaning to things, or leave things vague enough that they can be interpreted different ways. Now, there is a lot of Christian referencing here and a lot of biblical referencing here, so in light of that, the best way I can describe what's going on here in a lot of these lyrics is what I would refer to as parable. It's something that Jesus did when he spoke. Those that have read the Bible and know Jesus' words, he often spoke in parables, and basically it was him telling stories to illustrate things, and based upon the listener's understanding, they could interpret it in multiple ways, and they could glean lessons from it at the sort of level they were ready and willing to understand, and he didn't necessarily spell it all out every single time. In fact, most of the time he didn't. So I'm finding that that's kind of a theme here with Tyler Joseph, from what I understand, the little bit I have looked up, because again, trying not to spoil things. The little bit I have looked up from him, it seems like he doesn't like explaining these things. He likes to just leave it up to the audience. So there is a bit of a like parable-like nature to this, which is, in my opinion, really quite cool. So as we go through this, I'm probably going to be pointing out a couple of levels. There's going to be, like, there's sort of a public versus personal level, or even like an obvious, or I don't want to say surface level, because some of this stuff isn't, it's not like it's shallow by any means, but maybe just sort of surface or obvious level of interpretation versus deeper or even kind of more spiritual level of interpretation. Like I said, kind of public versus personal. There's kind of the public interpretation, maybe him talking to the public or talking to his fans, and then there's kind of a personal interpretation of what he may have been meaning within himself. So, okay, let's start diving in. The first thing I'm going to point out is that in the song Message Man, in Blurry Face, which is, I'm just going to point this out just to further my point here about the parableness of this. Parableness. That's not even a word! It is now. Okay. So there's the lyrics in Message Man that says, please use discretion when you're messing with the message man. These lyrics aren't for everyone. Only few understand. And so again, I think this is kind of going to that parable nature of if you understand it, you understand it. And if you don't, you'll get the surface level, and that's totally okay too. It reminded me of I believe there's a verse in Matt. See, I should have looked this up before I started filming, y'all. I'm pretty sure it's in Matthew. I want to say it's Matthew 6. There's a verse that kind of intimates that those who have eyes to see and ears to hear will get the message. So again, there's different layers to this, and okay, anyways, let's have fun. Let's have fun. So before we start looking at the opening lines, those that have heard the song before know that kind of the general obvious theme of this song is this sort of version, or this sort of tug of war or struggle between like the day and the sun, and being kind of awake during the day in the sun, and then the dark and the night. And this kind of gets interpreted a little bit as like the day good or okay, and then the dark night bad. This is when all of the darkness comes to get you. And so on the obvious surface level, that's kind of the theme of the song, is really just trying to kind of get through the day, or you survive the night. Like the nights are really hard. You might be good during the day when the sun lights out and everything's good, but then the dark comes and your thoughts really can overtake you, and the theme is kind of like trying to just survive the night and still stay alive. But again, there's kind of this, there's like that obvious level, and then there's kind of a deeper level or a more spiritual take. And this is where I feel like Tyler starts to flip this on its head a little bit, or really push the envelope as to what these terms actually mean. Because on the surface, day and sun would seem like awake and good, and night and dark would seem like not good, bad, right? But this concept sort of gets flipped on its head when looking at more of the deeper meaning here. And that is that the day and the sun would be like putting on a mask and going through that ordinary life, going through the motions, which isn't necessarily a good or healthy thing, right? Just kind of swallowing everything down, trudging through it, putting on a mask and being okay, or even just sort of living an ordinary life and being normal and okay. Whereas the dark and the nighttime, while on the surface it may seem like this is something bad, this is when the darkness comes over, this is when all the voices in your head come out and all that, that instead that we could view it as, if the day is putting on a mask and sort of going through the motions, that the dark is when things get quiet, and that's actually when you can hear not only your own thoughts and maybe even intrusive thoughts from, Satan or darkness or whatever, or anxiety or whatever, but also even just hearing the voice of God, being able to have that quiet, in which the outside world and the expectations of the outside worlds slips away, and then it's just you and God talking. This could also be like prayer, because usually prayer is something people do at night in their bed, or at the foot of their bed, or even just kind of having um, that that sort of communication with something bigger than yourself, right? So that kind of, when the night comes and all of a sudden all these thoughts really start overtaking him, we can also view it as like maybe even, Satan or darkness trying to intrude on his connection with God. Okay, so there's a general theme for the song. So let's get started with the opening lines of the song. I wake up fine and dandy, but then by the time I find it handy to rip my heart apart and start planning my crash landing. Okay. Well, obviously we're waking up like we're starting the day. Right? But also we know from car radio that Tyler explains that for him, awake means to think. So looking at these lines, we can say that his thoughts start off fine, but as they get deeper, they start to sort of descend into this sort of depression, right? Now, the term crash landing is an interesting one to use here because, as we know, the name of the band 21 Pilots comes from the inspiration of an Arthur Miller play that was about a father who made airplane parts and then realized that there was a flaw in those airplane parts and had a decision to make as to whether or not he was going to recall them, and he ended up not recalling them, putting the parts out there anyway, and then it led to the crash and death of 21 pilots. And of course, Tyler chose this name. He's expressed as a sort of reminder of those difficult decisions that we face, and to always be cognizant of our actions and the decisions that we make. So this crash landing line here is kind of interesting when we know that the name of 21 pilots comes from 21 pilots dying in a plane crash. This could indicate here in this verse that by the time I find it handy to rip my heart apart and start planning my crash landing, this could even indicate a contemplation of really going through his heart and soul searching and contemplating his life decisions. All right, let's continue with the first verse. I go up, 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 up to the ceiling. Then I feel my soul start leaving like an old man's hair receding. I'm pleading, please, oh please, on my knees, repeatedly asking, why's it gotta be like this? Is this living for you? Okay, let's take a look at this section here. The obvious interpretation here is that as he reaches this level of sort of depression or madness or even level of suicidal thought, that, you know, God or people or whatever, some positive influence, pulls him out of it and keeps him alive. And so, because he's now kept alive, because he's not going to commit suicide, he's going to stay alive and live a long life, right? Like, I feel my soul start leaving like an old man's hair receding, and an old man's hair receding goes slowly. It's over time, right? If you're an old man, you're dying slowly, right? As opposed to a quick unaliving of oneself. So as he reaches the point that he's starting to really descend into madness here, all of a sudden he still feels his soul kind of like uplifted, and he's able to survive it, and he's able to still stay alive and die of old age instead. So that's kind of a bit of an obvious interpretation here, or one possible interpretation. But we can also look at it the other way. Because again, if we're looking at this in terms of flipping this on its head, where instead of the dark just being indicative of just bad, right, of bad thoughts, that if we view it as that time in which he would be most contemplative and the most connected to God, and that maybe is receiving, you know, instruction or kind of deeper spiritual instruction from God, that as he descends into this darkness, as he really starts overthinking it and gets closer to him and closer to God and his truth, that there's all this sort of level of ascension towards God, right? That as he starts ripping his heart apart and planning this crash landing and planning that things are just gonna, like, he's just gonna get overwhelmed, then he feels his soul, he goes up to the ceiling and feeling his soul start leaving. So then he feels this sort of like ascension and closeness to God. So this could indicate, this is kind of the start of the indication that he has flipped this idea on the head, that nighttime may not just be a straight bad, dark, intrusive thoughts time period, but could be the time that he's most connected with God, because as the day goes along, like, he gets up in the morning and puts on his mask and hides his true self, or hides reality, like just kind of goes through the motions and goes through the societal expectations. But then as the day goes further and further along and he is more connected to thoughts and even more connected to God, that as he gets closer to the night, then his soul starts going up, as in ascension and becoming closer to God. Okay. Again, double meanings. This could also indicate praying as well, that as he gets closer into the night, and that this sort of ascension or this closeness with God is coming through prayer, meditation. But then there's also these lines here that kind of indicate that he's asking God if it needs to be like this. Like, does it and again, on the surface level, this could come off as, does it need to be like this? Like, does it this need to be so depressing? Do I need to go through this cycle of suicidal thoughts constantly? Um, or again, for judging it from this sort of spiritual perspective of this is when he's closest to God and kind of communicating with God, he could be asking God, does it need to be like this? As in like, does this needs to be so overwhelming? Because every time I feel like I'm closest to you, that's when I get overwhelmed by these temptations, or I feel like Satan is really coming after me and really attacking me with all of these like struggles and temptations and tribulations and anxieties and all of this stuff. And so the question of, is this living free, can be asking in the under the idea of suicidal thought, like, is this living free? If I'm totally chained to this cycle over and over, is this living free? Or again, on the spiritual end of the interpretation, is this living free as in like, is this living free, is me seeing this truth, like this is a heavy weight, like you, if you're speaking truth to me and you're teaching me all these things, now I can't unsee these things, and this is a heavy burden, like is this really living free if I'm like living with the heavy burden of all of this truth? Another interesting interpretation of the I feel my soul start leaving line is of course the fact that skeletons are very much part of the imagery with this album and part of the symbolism here in terms of the vessel album, because there's the idea of the vessel, like, the carrier of the message, right? Like his physical body and his, being just sort of the vessel holding this spirit or soul or this message that needs to get out there. So this line of I feel my soul start leaving, it's like if his soul leaves, then what's left behind? His physical body, right? The skeletons, the bones. Okay. Okay, so this next section. I don't want to be the one to have the sun's blood on my hands. I'll tell the moon, take this weapon forged in darkness. Some see a pen, I see a harpoon. Okay, here are some really interesting lines, you guys. Of course, on the surface level, or sort of this, general interpretation here, there's the general understanding that he doesn't want these dark suicidal thoughts at night. Simple as that, right? I don't want to be the one to like, take myself out. Like, so I'm telling the moon, like, please leave me alone. Like, please take this, and leave me alone with it. Even, taking the pen, being his writing, it's like, if this is when these thoughts come and he writes, and he writes, like, just, can you just take this? I don't want it. Okay, now let's look at the deeper meaning of this. There are multiple verses in the Bible that reference the sun being turned to darkness and the moon into blood before Christ returns again. Um, and I thought of this when I saw these lines, because there's this having the sun's blood on my hands, is in like taking the sun out. So there would be like the sun being darkened, but then even just the use of the word blood and the mention of the moon, I said there's these verses that talk about the sun being turned to darkness and the moon into blood. So that was one of the first images that came to mind when I saw these lines. So given the lyrics that have come before it, and then these here, this could indicate that during the night or during the time that he is most connected with God and learning truths from God, or even God maybe wanting him to be a bit of a messenger or to get a positive message out there, that if it has anything to do with this sort of event that Christians look forward to, right, like the returning of Christ or things like that, and it's sort of setting the world up for good and preparing the world for, this goodness that is believed to be coming, then he may not want that responsibility. That's a really big responsibility. That's a really big weight. That's kind of a heavy burden to take on, to feel like you are being called to be a, vessel of hope or a vessel of for this positive message to get out there. And so if he feels like this is not a responsibility that he wants to have, this could indicate him wanting to give up his pen or weapon in that fight. That if God is asking him to use his pen to get this message out, that he's saying, look, I don't want to be the one to do this, to have the sun, the sun's blood on my hands and and everything, like with this verses in the Bible and this sort of prophecy. It's like, I don't want this. Here, I'll just tell the moon, take this, and and take it from me. It is interesting that he does use the word harpoon here as opposed to any other weapon. Now the most obvious reason, of course, is that harpoon rhymes with moon. But I think there's also an extra little connection here, and that is a harpoon is often a weapon used at sea and is connected with water. I haven't gotten to the scaled and icy album yet, but I have seen that the little logo for it looks like a Neptune trident, which is the god of the sea. So, or Neptune or Poseidon. So, anyway, but I do find it interesting that, again, he uses the word harpoon, which is a weapon often used at sea. And of course, he's talking to the moon. I'll tell the moon to take this weapon because some see a pen and I see a harpoon. And the moon, of course, is responsible for the tides. Now, there could also be a double meaning here with the word sun, because while he is using this in, like, it's spelled like sun in relation to sun and moon, it could also be a double meaning here, as in sun, like S-O-N, in which case it could be a reference to the Son, again, with this sort of biblical reference of Christ returning again, but it could also be the Son as in himself. I don't want to have the Son's blood on my hands, which again ties back to this theme of suicidal ideation and getting through the night alive. In later songs on the album, such as The Run and Go, he does say he killed a man, so could this be referring to himself, or at least a version of himself that he maybe feels like he should be but doesn't want to be, or doesn't feel like he is worthy of, or doesn't feel like he lives up to. So the lines, "I'll stay awake because the dark's not taking prisoners tonight," on the surface seems like a pretty easy line to interpret if we're going with the theme of making it through the night and not giving in to suicidal ideation. Then staying awake and not letting the dark take you prisoner is staying alive, right? But if we look at the deeper meaning, because again, if we look at this, take this from a more spiritual perspective, when everything gets flipped around, right? Where instead of the dark being, bad and sun and awake being good, we're going to flip this around a little bit, and we're actually going to view that being awake in the daytime as the bad here, where this is putting on a mask, this is going through the motions, this is, so then these lines take on a bit of a different meaning, that if he's saying, "I'll stay awake because the dark's not taking prisoners tonight," then staying awake means staying in the daytime mask, right? I'm going to stay in this like ordinary life because I don't want to be prisoner to this mission. I don't want to be prisoner to this message that that God's asked me to bear the responsibility of. I don't want to do it. I'm just gonna stay awake, stay in my daytime mask. So the next section we're going to look at here is the section here that starts with the "Why am I not scared in the morning? I don't hear those voices calling. I must have kicked them out. I swear I heard demons yelling. Those crazy words they were spelling. They told me I was gone." Okay, so again, on the surface, these are pretty easy lyrics to interpret. In the morning, the dark thoughts are gone, right? Why am I not scared in the morning? I wake up, all these dark thoughts are gone. Yay, I'm feeling okay again. Again, we're going to look deeper. We're going to flip this on its head. If we're putting on the mask and, being regular and normal and, not like God's messenger, then Satan doesn't attack me, right? Satan and darkness, they're not going to go after me. They're not going to bother me because I'm not special. I'm just an ordinary person, not being connected to God at all. Or it could even be interpreted here as maybe not sure if this connection with God is even real or not. Like if he gets up and is like, "Well, wait, why am I not scared? I swear I heard voices calling. Like I swear I heard God talking to me, or I swear I heard Satan trying to come at me and tell me intrusive thoughts and come after me. Like the closer I get to God, the more he attacks me. And I swear I heard these demons yelling and like they were telling me stuff and they were telling me I was gone. Like they were gonna, you know what I mean? Like they were gonna come after me. I was gone. But now I'm up in the morning and now I'm not scared. Now I don't hear them." Because again, if I'm up in the morning, I put on the mask. So now that I'm putting on the mask and just kind of going about everyday life and going through the motions of what society expects, all of a sudden I don't really hear them coming after me anymore. So there could be a question of, is this connection to God even real? Like, is this even a thing? Because if I just kind of put on my mask and go about my day, then everything's fine. So yeah, it's different ways you can interpret these lines. And of course, the "Tell Me I Was Gone" lines, I think, directly connect to the song "Goner," which is the last song on the Blurryface album, and I do think it makes for quite an interesting book ending, so to speak, to have Ode to Sleep be the very first song on the Vessel album, and then Goner being the very last song on the Blurry Face album. And so you have these book endings, which I think is really quite interesting, and we will probably get into a little bit more if and when I do a lyric analysis of the song Goner. All right, so the next section. But I'll tell him, why won't you let me go? Do I threaten all your plans? I'm insignificant. Please tell them you have no plans for me. I will set my soul on fire. What have I become? I'll tell them. Okay, let's break this down. um, okay, so again, if we're looking at this, general public sort of surface level interpretation here, if darkness told him he was gone, darkness or Satan or whatever told him he was gone, right? These suicidal thoughts, and he'll ask why they won't leave me alone. Like, why won't you leave me alone? Leave me alone. I don't want these dark thoughts. Look, I'm not this important to attack. Just leave me alone. Set my soul on fire, so I'm not really worth going after. I'm an empty vessel now. I'm not important. Leave me alone. Leave me alone with these suicidal thoughts. Okay. Let's look a little deeper. If we're looking at this again from this spiritual perspective, or this connection with God, or him sort of feeling like he's maybe this sort of vessel or messenger for God that he doesn't really want to, a burden he doesn't really want to carry, then these lines viewed through that lens is like, okay, if somebody asks me, right, if they're coming after me or they're asking me about it, here's what I'm going to tell them, okay? I'll tell them, why won't you let me go? Like, why aren't you leaving me alone? Do I threaten all your plans? So here is where I think that would be kind of talking to Satan a bit. Like, do I like threaten your plans or something, Satan, by doing this, by speaking what I'm trying to speak? Because like, why won't you leave me alone? Like, seriously, am I really that big of a threat to you? Look, but then he doesn't want these attacks, so it's like, I'm insignificant. Just leave me alone. And then there's almost this seems like a plea to even God. Like, please tell him. Tell him you have no plans for me. Like, tell him I'm not some special vessel or some special messenger. Like, tell him that I'm nothing. You tell him you have no plans for me. I'm not that important. I will set my soul on fire. What have I become? I'll tell him. Okay. So from this perspective, then it seems like a pleading of wanting Satan to leave him alone. And so there's this, again, this sort of denial. We'll get to that in a second. This sort of denial of this messenger responsibility because he just wants to be left alone. Now, there is an interesting reference here with the I will set my soul on fire line. This I actually think is a Switchfoot reference. The band Switchfoot has a song called On Fire on their Beautiful Letdown album. From what I understand, Tyler Joseph has actually cited this album as being one of his favorite albums. So I definitely think this was a reference here. But the Switchfoot song On Fire has the following lyrics contained in it. But everything inside you knows there's more than what you've heard. There's so much more than empty conversations filled with empty words. Now we know that Tyler has a section of the song Holding On to You in which he kind of references this and talks about this, that we should move our feet to an introspective beat, right? There's these lyrics that mean nothing in our, so this kind of goes along with this theme within this song. More lyrics from this Switchfoot song are, when everything inside me looks like everything I hate, you are the hope I have for change, you are the only chance I'll take. As we see through themes not only in this album but also in Blurry Face, there seems to be a real struggle with who he is, maybe dark sides of himself, who he feels like he should be versus who he is. And so there's kind of a level of like having a bit of dislike or hatred for certain parts of himself that he feels aren't good. Another lyric from Switchfoot is also, I'm standing at the edge of everything I've never been before. There's kind of this sort of precipice line of facing something that you are unsure of or that have never really done before, but you're being asked to do. And then these lines, which is here's where I think the direct reference is, and it's these lines here. I'm on fire when you're near me. I'm on fire when you speak. I'm on fire, burning at these mysteries. And of course, this song, the Switchfoot song, is from the perspective of singing to God. Um, so when he says, I will set my soul on fire, this seems to be a bit of a reference in which he is referencing that he is on fire when he's close to God, and this could have a double meaning of being on fire, burning at these mysteries, meaning like I don't understand why this is happening to me. But it's happening and he's on fire. Okay. Okay, guys. It's the heavy. We have entered the heavy. All right. We are going to be talking about this section of lyrics for quite some time because there is just so much here, y'all. Okay. So here's the lyrics we're looking at. We're going to be looking at this section here. Okay. Let's go line by line because there is so much here. So first line here, on the eve of a day that's forgotten and fake. Of course, Eve immediately evokes the biblical reference of Eve from Adam and Eve, the mother of all living. Okay, let's keep going. Now, this whole line, on the eve of a day that's forgotten and fake. So, of course, eve usually means evening. It indicates the night before. So, this is like on the eve of a day, so the night before this day, that's forgotten and fake. So funny enough, I actually, for some reason, thought of Christmas Eve. Because, yeah, it's the night before Christmas, and the original tradition of Christmas has been forgotten. On a day that's forgotten, the original tradition there, the original sort of celebration there has kind of been forgotten because we have a bit more of a modern take on it. It's based on pagan tradition, especially things with like Christmas trees. And here's where I think it gets a little interesting here, and how you can interpret in different ways here, because you could interpret it as just on the eve of a day that's forgotten and fake. End of line. Okay, it's forgotten and fake. We've kind of forgotten the real meaning of Christmas, and the current Christmas we have right now is pretty fake. From what a lot of biblical scholars now indicate, that Jesus was probably actually born in the spring and not in the winter at all. And then of course this our Christmas traditions and things like Christmas trees and things like that are all kind of based on pagan tradition and winter solstice and all that. So there's that. Okay, eve of a day that's forgotten and fake. It's kind of could be maybe something indicating something, that an experience he may have had on a Christmas Eve one night. But then you can also interpret it another way, because it's not entirely clear if that is the end of the line or if it flows into the next line, because the next line starts with as the trees. So we could also read this as on the eve of a day that's forgotten and fake as the trees. There's a lot of artificial trees at Christmas. I'm just saying. Okay, so so you could read this in either way, either you can read this with either punctuation, but let's just look at the way it's actually broken up, which is on the eve of a day that's forgotten and fake. Okay, now let's start the next line with as the trees. Okay, as the trees, they await and clouds anticipate the start of a day when we put on our face a mask that portrays that we don't need grace. Okay, there's already so much here. Let's break it down line by line. So as the trees, they await and clouds anticipate. Okay, first, let's talk about the trees in this line. We know that there is the song Trees, okay? And then we also have the song Forest. So we have that as some context here, that generally speaking, or at least the public or surface sort of interpretation of this could be that trees are those that are around us as support, right? If we go out into the forest and we join hands with other trees, our community and support system, this could be interpreted this way as well. But also, I saw a clip of an interview in which Tyler was talking about trees, and I believe he was even talking about the song Trees, in which he talked about sort of going out into nature and forest, or going out in the trees to kind of just sort of connect and sort of connect with the spiritual or connect with God. And so for here, the trees here may indicate kind of a spiritual experience of some kind. Now, trees also, of course, provide oxygen, air, which can also be interpreted as the breath of life, again tying on a spiritual level to God, who gives us the breath of life. Okay, so trees can be interpreted as a connection with the spiritual. Okay, now let's look at the clouds. Okay, clouds biblically tend to represent God's presence. And in some instances can even be symbolic of prophecy. Okay, so let's look at these lines. As the trees, they await, and clouds anticipate. So this kind of gives the idea, the sense that, okay, maybe there was, whether it was Christmas Eve or another day, on this evening, that he may have gone out into the trees, and into the clouds, that as the trees, they await and clouds anticipate. So this could be indicating that that spiritual side, or God may have been anticipating him or waiting for him to reach out to him. Another thing to insert here with the mention of clouds in the sky, in the song Screen on Vessel, there's the lines, there's some people some people and I who have a really tough time getting through this life, so excuse us while we sing to the sky. Cool. So if we're connecting clouds and sky to God's presence, it's kind of like, hey, some of us have a hard time, so forgive us if some of us turn to God to get through it. Okay. Okay, so let's continue with these lines. So as the trees they await and clouds anticipate the start of a day when we put on our face a mask that portrays that we don't need grace. So this can, of course, the start of the day when we put on our face, again, if we're looking at it from we get up and we put on our face and it's this, face mask that is all about expectation, and it also portrays that we don't need grace, that we don't need people, that we're good. We got it all figured out. I don't need anything. I don't need any help. But also, we don't need grace. Grace, of course, being another potential spiritual reference here to Jesus Christ or to God. So when we take these lines together, as the trees they await and clouds anticipate, it's like if God is like God knows him and he's waiting for him to reach out, but he's also anticipating the start of the day when he knows that his son is going to go put on that mask and probably ignore him again and pretend like he doesn't need him or doesn't want to. Again, this is also, once again, I feel referencing that he's kind of going, yeah, I think I'd prefer to just have the ease of just living a normal life rather than taking on the burden of being this vessel and this messenger. And God knows it. He knows he's gonna do it. He knows he's gonna get up tomorrow and he's gonna put on that mask and he's gonna try to just ignore it. Okay, let's keep going. On the eve of a day that is bigger than us, but we open our eyes because we're told that we must. On the surface, of course, this seems like it's just talking more again about making it through the night to survive another day and just thinking and staying alive.
Okay guys, as I was going through this section in post, I decided I really didn't like my explanation here, so yay, you get a voiceover. So if we're taking a spiritual lens to the lines on the eve of a day that is bigger than us, but we open our eyes because we're told that we must, we could view this as the day that is bigger than us being another reference to what was talked about earlier, to this sort of when Christ is coming again, or this big sort of a Christian event that is looked forward to, and him not really wanting to take on the burden of being a part of that or being a part of that message. But we open our eyes because we're told that we must. So he's wrestling with the idea here of opening his eyes to it and accepting that this is coming because he must, which then leads us directly into these next lines.
And the trees wave their arms, and the clouds try to plead, desperately yelling, "There's something we need." On the surface level here, this would kind of this would represent like the people, God, or whatever, just your support system around you offering help. If we take the look at this on a deeper level, we're actually going to put these together. We're going to put the on the eve of a day that's bigger than us, but we open our eyes because we're told that we must, and the trees wave their arms, and the clouds try to plead, desperately yelling, "There's something we need." So we're actually going to put all of those together to get a sort of a spiritual understanding here of the idea, again, of him him opening his eyes or waking up during the day is putting on that mask, right? Putting on the normalcy mask of like just going through normal everyday life and ignoring this sort of bigger responsibility from God of being, being a messenger for him. And again, if the trees and the clouds are representative of God, or the divine, so then trees and clouds wave and plead, there's something we need. This could be an additional representation here that God is really trying to plead with him that, hey, I really do need you. Like, I really do need you to get this message out there. And he's just like really wanting to hang on to his mask and like not, because it's a big responsibility. Let's look at this next section here. I'm not free. I asked forgiveness 3 times, same amount that I denied. I 3-time MVP'd this crime. I'm afraid to tell you who I adore. Won't tell you who I'm singing towards. Metaphorically, I'm a whore. That's denial number 4. Okay, so again, on the surface here, this can be interpreted as feeling stuck or imprisoned in depression and sort of asking forgiveness over and over for not overcoming it or for continuing to struggle with it or even having suicide attempts or whatever. But now let's take a look at a deeper, let's dive in deeper. Okay, so on the deeper spiritual level here, let's just take that phrase, I'm not free. This could be interpreted a couple ways. It could either be feeling imprisoned by this task, right? If the trees and clouds, if God's waving at him, pleading, look, we need something from you. Like, we need you to be this messenger. This could be I'm not free, as in like, like, okay, I feel stuck in this. Like, I feel like I'm not free here. He's asking me to do this and I have to do it. Or it could also be interpreted as feeling chained by this addiction or darkness or imperfection or the attacks from Satan or anything and not overcoming it. So this could also be interpreted as not feeling up to the task here of if God's asking you, pleading with you, look, I need this from you. I need you to be my messenger. And then him going, I'm not free. Like I'm bound by addiction, or I'm bound by these dark thoughts, or I'm bound by these anxieties. Like anything that he feels is holding him back or making him like not worthy for his task. So this could be a I'm not free as in I feel imprisoned by this task, or it could be I'm not free as in he's trying to tell God I'm not free. Like I have stuff here that's like not gonna allow me to do this properly for you, and feeling a bit unworthy of it. Okay, next, let's look at I asked forgiveness 3 times, same amount that I denied. I 3-time MVP'd this crime. This is obviously a biblical reference to Simon Peter, who denied Christ 3 times after his crucifixion. And okay, so this section gets really, really interesting knowing this reference. So this could be like Tyler denying the task that God has asked of him. If God is pleading with him to be this messenger and this, in this vessel for this message, and he has denied God 3 times. I've asked God for forgiveness 3 times because like forgiveness for not taking on this task because I've denied doing this task 3 times. Now what makes this interesting is that we see these 3 denials in this song. If we look back at the section of lines, that's the but I'll tell him, why won't you let me go? Do I threaten all your plans? I'm insignificant, please tell him. We look at the part that I'm counting as the denial here is the I'll tell him, because that would be the answer. If somebody asks you, and so if we're taking the Simon Peter reference, somebody asked him if he knew Christ, the denial is in what he told them, right? Just no, I'll tell him. No, okay. So that I'll tell him is what I'm looking at here. So in this first sort of chorus section here, I'll tell them, why won't you let me go? Do I threaten all your plans? I'm insignificant. Please tell them. That's a second tell them. Tell them you have no plans for me. I'll set my soul on fire. What have I become? I'll tell them. Okay, so that's 3 times that they're going to be told, no, I'm not special. Okay, so up until this point in the song, we've only gotten that chorus, if we want to call it a chorus, I'm going to call it a chorus. Up until this point in the song, we have only had that chorus 1 time, which means that the I'll tell him has only happened 3 times. So up until this point in the song, he's only denied 3 times. Okay, so he says that. I've asked forgiveness 3 times, same amount that I denied. I 3-time MVP'd this crime. Now, this could happen if he's saying, I asked forgiveness 3 times. It could be at 3 different times. It could be in this experience, like if we went out into the forest to talk to God. It could be in that exchange. We don't know. It's not super clear here. But okay, he asked forgiveness 3 times because he has denied him 3 times. And we've seen that denial in this song up until this point. Let's keep going. The next couple of lines here. I'm afraid to tell you who I adore. Won't tell you who I'm singing towards. Okay. First, I think this is actually another subtle nod to Christmas, because there is the Christmas carol that says, "Come let us adore him." And so he says, "I'm afraid to tell you who I adore." Okay, won't tell you who I'm singing towards. All right, so on the surface, again, on the surface, sort of public general level, it could be that there's kind of a question here. Is he singing to the public or is he singing to God? Right? It's like, I'm afraid to tell you who I adore. I won't tell you who I'm singing towards. I'm not going to tell you if I'm actually singing to you or if I'm singing to God. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. Again, remember that sort of parable level thinking. If people want to take it as a message to them, just stay alive. You know what I mean? Fantastic. That's a great message. Take it that way. um, but if you want to take it further and take it as me talking to God, okay, there's like another message here, right? There's a whole other situation going on here between me and God. Okay, so that's kind of an obvious level of reading here, okay? Is he talking to the public or talking to God? But let's dive even deeper, y'all, even deeper. All right. In the Bible, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, it talks about that no man can serve 2 masters, okay? He cannot serve God and mammon. Now, mammon is interpreted to mean wealth, riches, material success, okay? So you cannot serve God and wealth or material riches, okay? So when we look at these lines, is he singing for God and his message, or is he singing to be financially successful? Right? We know in Blurry Face, in the song Stressed Out, that there's the pressure to wake up, you need to make money. And again, wake up, daylight, put on the mask, expectations, right? Put your mask on of societal expectations and make money. Okay? And so here there's this, I'm afraid to tell you who I adore, won't tell you who I'm singing towards. So I'm afraid to tell you who I adore. I'm afraid to tell you whether or not I'm actually singing for God and his message, or if I'm actually singing to like pay my bills, you know? So he could be telling us that he's afraid to tell us that he loves God and is singing towards God, and or singing towards us for God, like on behalf of God, or he could be saying that he's even afraid to tell God if he adores him or the success more, right? I'm afraid to tell you who I adore. He could even be addressing God. Like, won't tell you who I'm singing towards. So is he singing towards us that he's afraid to tell us who he adores? Or is he singing to God and he's afraid to tell God who he adores? He's afraid to tell God, actually, I think I kind of just adore, the success more than being your messenger. I'm going to put on my mask and just be a success, worldly success, and not have to carry the burden of your message. Okay, so the next line's metaphorically, I'm a whore. And that's denial number 4. All right, so historically speaking, a whore would be someone who served, or slept with more than one person. So again, this could be referencing the idea of not being able to serve both God and money, right? Tyler could be admitting here that he may be trying to serve both, making him a whore, and thereby denying God in that way, which would be the 4th denial to the 3 that we've already done before we got here. Now, biblically, the word whore is used as a metaphor for idolatry or just being unfaithful to God. So while yes, there is this idea of like, okay, is he serving God or is he serving money? Because you would, if you're a whore, you sleep with someone for money. Okay, anyway, so But in the biblical sense of the word, if this is a metaphor for idolatry or being unfaithful to God, Tyler could be saying that he's giving into his worldly idols and turning away from God's mission for him. That being a fourth denial. All right, now another fun little note here. Idolatry could also be a reference back to the beginning of this whole verse here, with again another possible connection to Christmas here, as the modern celebration of Christmas with trees again is tied to the pagan practices and not the actual birth of Christ, and could be, viewed in some Christian circles as a form of idol worship or idolatry there. So again, there's kind of another additional reference tied back to this. So, okay. So we've got here that metaphorically he's a whore. He's not sure which master he's serving here. And so there's the denial number 4. We had the 3 in that first chorus before we even got there. And then now here's a fourth one, being afraid to tell God which master he really serves here and who he's actually singing to makes for another denial. So for the rest of the song here, the song basically repeats itself. There's not really any new lines here except for one at the very end, which we'll get to here in just a second. I just want to leave a few little notes about these last repeating sections. Again, we talked about how there was the 3 denials by the time you get to that second verse, which occurred in that first chorus, but now we have this sort of repeating chorus going along with this you have no plans for me section of the song. And if you pay attention to how many times that you have no plans for me section appears in the entire song, it's 4 denials. And then additionally interesting is that towards the very end of the song here, he has a portion of that repeating refrain in which he says the phrase, I'll tell them. And again, the I'll tell them being a denial. He repeats that phrase, I'll tell them, 4 times. So we have 4 denials in the 4 you have no plans for me sections. And then we also have 4 denials in the I'll tell them being said 4 times in a row at the end of the song. Now, the only new lyric here that we're left with is at the very, very end of the song. He ends the song with, I'm sorry. Now, the music playing throughout this is the happiest by this point. Okay, we have sections of the song that sound kind of sort of down and edgier and a bit darker, and then we have this sort of happy-go-lucky sort of tempo during parts of the song. And if you pay attention through the song and pay attention to those sections, on the surface, again, if we're reading this from sort of a surface level of a bit of a suicide prevention song, those darker tones come during the times when he would be wrestling in the night with these dark thoughts, and then the happier tones are kind of during the day when everything's kind of okay. But if you pay attention, if we're flipping this around on its head, in which the sort of dark is when he is really connecting with God, and the daytime is when he's putting on the mask and running from God. Well, though that's what's carrying the happier music here. The happier music is coming during the times that he's denying God. So even though by the end of the song the music has gotten really at its peak happy, okay, it's peak happiness in sound when we get to the end of the song, and yet he says, I'm sorry. So if we're at the peak happiness of sound, and that happiness sound is during the times that he's denying God, then that last I'm sorry could really be interpreted here as, I'm sorry, I've given up. I have given in to just keeping the mask on and not being your messenger. I'm sorry. Last but certainly not least, we need to address this song title, y'all. It is called Ode to Sleep, and this is never said in the song. Not even the word sleep is mentioned in this song. Now, let's start with what is an ode. Okay, an ode is a lyrical poem that usually addresses or celebrates something that's often no longer present. So if we're taking the surface, summation of this song about overcoming the dark thoughts and staying alive, and this can be viewed as a celebration of not going to sleep, as in not dying, right? Like not giving into these suicidal thoughts. But if we're taking this kind of, flipped on its head, deeper sort of spiritual analysis of it, this could be indicating that there's this sort of avoiding this heavy burden of omission from God. It could be viewed as a celebration of trying to stay asleep, right? Meaning that he doesn't want to be awake and thinking and connected to his faith and connected with God's mission. Okay. Now, the last note I want to leave you with is that an ode is not just a lyrical poem that celebrates something, but it's also typically written in a varied or irregular meter, as is this song. All right, guys, that's my analysis of Ode to Sleep. I hope that you found this entertaining and that you didn't totally fall asleep. No pun intended. If you enjoyed this type of content, let me know in the comments. If there's another song that you want me to do, leave that in the comments. Which song should I do next? And it doesn't even have to be a 21 Pilots song, honestly. If there's a song that you think is just really begs some lyrical analysis, leave it down in the comments for me and let me know. I appreciate all of you. This has been such an incredible journey. I am absolutely obsessed with 21 Pilots now. Do I get a clicky card now? Like, am I part of the clique? Like, do I need to apply for a card? Do these copious, insane, psychopathic notes, does this qualify me in any way to be part of the clique? I want to be in. I need to be in. I need to be official. What do I gotta do?
I'll do anything. I'll do whatever it takes to...
And if you are not a member of my Patreon or Discord yet, you really, really should be. It is free to join both of those, and we have so much fun in both of those. Patreon, free Patreon, has all kinds of content, y'all, and you get this content earlier than YouTube. So you get early access to this content on free Patreon. Okay, free early access, y'all. And then Discord is super fun. This is where we can hang out and chat with each other in real time. That's the quickest way to get announcements and alerts for live streams or other fun things that we're doing. And if you're especially enjoying this content and would like to see even more of it, especially my entire 21 Pilots journey, including full album reviews, then you'll want to take a look and consider a paid Patreon tier. The Besties tier is where you'll find my entire unabridged Patreon library of content. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.